Starting off this countdown, we have the poisonous plants. There are a number of poisonous plants in Yellowstone Park that can kill you, including hemlock or meadow death. A simple touch of this plant can cause terrible allergic reactions. If you're stupid enough to ingest it, it can cause nervous system paralysis, nausea, convulsions, you can slip into a coma, and in severe cases, you could even die from it. Now, you might be like, I'm not stupid enough to pick up a random plant and eat it. Well, believe me, some people are. A couple of years ago, a whole family died after adding one of the poisonous plants they found at Yellowstone to their soup. Of course, anyone who ate that soup was later killed. Maybe avoid doing that at all costs. In our 9th spot, we have the Headless Bride. So Yellowstone is home to a number of ghosts, one of them being a ghost of a headless bride. So story goes that back in the day, a newlywed couple decided to go to Yellowstone for their honeymoon. However, while there, the two ended up having a fight over money, and the husband stormed away from his wife. A few days later, she was found beheaded in the Yellowstone's hotel bathroom. Her head was later found in a treehouse called the Crow's Nest. Now, apparently, the bride's ghost roams Yellowstone Park. A number of people have seen her at midnight walking around. She also is said to emerge from the crow's nest with her head under her arm and then heads to the very room that she was murdered in. Time to go ghost hunting at Yellowstone. Who's with me? Moving on to number 8, we have the bodies. A number of people have sadly passed away at this park. It's probably why it's haunted. If they're out exploring the park alone, then half the time the park rangers find their remains. Let's take the example of David Kerwin, for example. In 1981, David Kerwin and his friend and his dog went out to Yellowstone. As soon as they arrived, the dog got out of the car and ran straight into the hot spring. Kerwin then dove in right after him, but sadly was unable to save the dog. When he got out of the water, his eyes were completely white. The hot water completely blinded him. Sadly, he passed away shortly after, and the dog was never rescued. What's even worse is that the fat from the dog caused small eruptions in the hot springs for several days after. Disgusting. Moving on, at number 7, we have the bears. Okay, so obviously Yellowstone is a national park, meaning wild animals roam freely. That's what people often forget. They think that it's like a zoo where the animals are fenced off. No, honey, no. Sadly, bear attacks happen more often than you think at this park. Most people survive them, thankfully, but still a number have lost their lives. In 2010, a man named Kevin Kammer was pulled out of his tent by a bear and was dragged to death. That same bear later went on to attack 2 other visitors at the park. Coming in at number 6, we have the Old Faithful Snow Lodge. Sounds like a cute and cozy place to stay, right? Well, for sure, it's cute and cozy, but it's also haunted. This lodge is home to some of the spookiest apparitions, one of them being the ghost of a woman dressed in late 1800s clothing. She is known to float around the foot of your bed during the night. Like, imagine that, waking up and seeing this ghostly lady in your room. I swear, I'd pee myself. This happened to a husband and wife a couple years ago. The wife woke up in the middle of the night to see this ghost at the end of her bed. She got so scared that she dug her fingernails into her husband's shoulder. The next day, the couple reported their encounter to the hotel staff and showed them the claw marks on his shoulder as proof. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the siren. Sirens are said to be mythological creatures depicted in the form of a mermaid that would sing songs to sailors before luring them to their death. Well, apparently Yellowstone has sirens, so maybe they aren't so mythological after all. In 2016, a man named Colin Scott at the Norris Geyser Basin in Yellowstone walked into the hot water after being serenaded by a siren. According to his sister that was with him, her brother stopped, stared at a floating nude female figure in the water, and then just fell into the water. She even got it on tape and showed it to the first responder at the scene. In fact, it was the first responder that shared this story publicly because he was so blown away at what he saw. In our 4th spot today, we have the bison. Not only do you need to worry about bears at Yellowstone, but you have to worry about bison attacks as well. In 2015, 5 guests at the park were attacked by bison. One woman was not even that close to one, but she turned around to take a photo with it and it ended up charging her and she got pierced by its horns. Same thing happened to a man trying to take a photo of it on his tablet. It charged him and flung him into the air multiple times. So, What did we learn here today, folks? Leave animals alone and don't try to take selfies with them because bison don't like getting their pictures taken. In our third spot, we have the ghosts of the employees. Apparently, Yellowstone is also haunted by the ghosts of several employees. A number of guests have reported seeing and interacting with staff members dressed in early 1900s clothing. One guy in particular haunts the Yellowstone Hotel. He has appeared a number of times to help guests with their luggage. He also lets guests know good paths to explore. So at least he's friendly and helpful. But there's a reason why his spirit is still attached to the park. Some believe that he died there in a tragic accident. Coming in at number 2, we have the deadly gases. Yellowstone's hydrothermal areas emit gases that are typically harmless. It's composed of mainly water vapor, but also contains hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide. Both can kill you in high concentrations. Carbon dioxide is a colorless, odorless gas, so you won't even know if you're breathing it in. Hydrogen sulfide, on the other hand, smells like rotten eggs. Both gases are often diluted by wind, but if you find yourself in a depression with low winds, then the gases can accumulate there and kill you. In 2004, a number of bison and bears were found dead near a basin. They had been killed by the gases. In 1939, a park employee was digging a 26-foot deep pit when he fell in. Hydrogen sulfide had accumulated in the pit and ended up taking his life. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the geysers. Yellowstone has a number of natural geysers and springs that are beautiful. Some you're even allowed to swim in, like the Boiling River and Firehole River. Sounds like they would cook you alive, but no, those ones are fine as long as you go during the right season and tide. With that being said, there are a number of springs that can cook you alive. At least 20 people have died in Yellowstone from incidents with the hot water from the geysers and springs. Let's take a look at the story of John Mark Williams, for example. During a snowstorm, he fell into a 187 degrees hot spring and he was burnt alive from his feet to his neck. When he was rescued from it, the skin had already melted off his entire body. Then in 2000, Sarah Holfers and 2 other seasonal park employees went night swimming in Firehole River. When they were done, they attempted to jump over one of the hot streams, but ended up falling into the boiling water. Sarah unfortunately passed away from 3rd-degree burns. Her 2 co-workers did survive, but they also had terrible burns all over their bodies. Starting off this countdown, we have the gas mask. More than 500,000 men were injured or killed by poison gas during World War I. As a result, gas attack countermeasures were put in place, including gas masks. Now, early gases didn't have deadly effects like mustard gas did. The first gas attacks involved tear gas and chlorine gas. Tear gas is obviously irritating but relatively harmless. Chlorine, though, could be incredibly fatal. So troops would use rags or towels covered in urine to protect themselves. This was before proper masks were created. The mask we see here look absolutely terrifying. It's one of the first ones ever invented for soldiers. It did its job until more modern ones were invented. But you can't help but admit that these look hella creepy. Coming in at number 9, we have the creepy sniper uniform. So apparently this is the uniform that snipers would wear during World War I to camouflage in with their surroundings. Now, I'm just waiting for the damn comments about, "What uniform? I can't see anything, all I see is an empty case, hardy har har." Now, not gonna lie, this thing looks very creepy. So the uniform was made of linen that was painted with green, black, brown, and cream oil paint to give it that camouflage effect. Apparently this particular costume was from a British Army sniper, and it's currently on display in the Imperial War Museum in London. In our 8th spot, we have the splatter mask. This was a mask that soldiers in tanks would use to protect themselves against remnants of explosions when looking through the viewports. It was given the name splatter mask because if a bomb was thrown or a shell explodes, obviously particles would come flying their way and, splatter onto their face. To avoid that, they wore these scary looking masks. The eyes were covered with metal, the mask was leather, and there was a chainmail skirt to cover their mouth and chin. Again, it did its part to protect soldiers, but it looked very creepy. Moving on to number 7, we have the Wall of Faces. After World War I, hundreds of soldiers were left wounded or disfigured, which is where Sir Harold Gillies comes into play. In the early 1900s, he started working on facial reconstruction for these wounded soldiers. Alongside artists, Gillies aimed to make the men look how they did before their injuries. This is a photo taken in Gillies' workshop. Yes, I know it looks scary, this is his wall of masks. Although it does look terrifying, Gillies' work was very important and helped shape modern-day plastic surgery and facial reconstruction. By the end of 1919, he managed to produce more than 185 masks. In our sixth spot, we have the foot. On October 12, 2011, archaeologists, a part of the Alsatian Archaeological Services, were exploring an underground war shelter in France when they came across something pretty horrifying. They found the remains of a German soldier. And by remains, I mean only his foot. He was buried alive after an enemy shell exploded above the tunnel in an attack on March 18, 1918. As for what happened to the rest of his body, I mean, you can only imagine. The men affected by this attack were considered missing in action until word got out about what happened to them. We are now at our fifth and halfway mark with the field dressing. This is a kit that each soldier carried during the First World War. It contained 2 dressings, which were comprised of a cotton gauze pad, a bandage, and a safety pin. Obviously, they carried this in case they got injured or their comrades did, and they couldn't get immediate medical attention. The kit also contained detailed instructions on how to open and apply the dressing. The scary thing about this is that the dressing is covered in blood splatter. Whether the soldiers survived treatment is unknown. This kit is now considered an artifact and is on display in Canada's War Museum in Ottawa. Coming in at number 4, we have the damaged helmet. This next item was a French combat helmet. It was sent to a museum directly from the battlefields in France by soldier Major Dana Wright. The scary part is that the helmet features bullet holes, one where the bullet entered the helmet and one where it exited the helmet. Now, we don't know how Major Wright got hold of the helmet, nor do we know if the soldier who wore it somehow survived, although a bullet to the head seems pretty hard to survive. This helmet just highlights the dangers of war and the sad reality that soldiers had to face. Coming in at number 3, we have the shell-shocked soldier and comrades. So the following image is a very popular one on the internet. It went viral because it's a photo of a shell-shocked soldier during 1916. It's a very scary photo. It shows Private Orbit Lindsay smiling at the camera. Little backstory, on the morning of September 16, 1916, he was in a trench cleaning his rifle when he was hit in the neck by sniper fire. Thankfully he survived, but he was stuck laying in the trenches just bleeding out, waiting to be rescued. But the original photo actually features 3 soldiers and some medical orderlies tending to them. One soldier is getting his back treated while blood pours out from a gash on his face. Another is getting his arm treated. This photo just really emphasizes the horrors of war. In our second spot, we have the mustard gas victims. Mustard gas was first used in 1917 by the Germans. It is extremely dangerous and poisonous. The effects that it had on soldiers were absolutely terrifying. It causes severe eye and skin burns and terrible skin blisters. Not only that, but when inhaled, it would irritate and burn the soldier's lungs. Bad exposure could even lead to permanent disfigurement. This photo features Canadian soldiers suffering from mustard gas burns. The one soldier on the right closest to the camera got it really bad. His whole face and arms were burned and blistered. The other soldier behind him only was affected on his left side of his body. Still very scary. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the life-saving coins. Believe it or not, but 6 coins in a soldier's pocket managed to save his life after it stopped a bullet from entering his chest. On September 26, 1914, soldier Optitus Bison was out on the battlefields when he was shot by a German soldier. But the bullet managed to ricochet off of the coins he had in his breast pocket. So Bison acted dead, and then when the soldier left, he crawled to safety. The ironic part is that the coins were what got him shot in the first place. They were clinging together in his pockets, and that gave away his position. But then, they were the reason that he lived. Isn't that incredible? Like, what are the odds of that? Either he's a very lucky or unlucky soldier. After the war, Bison lived until 1958 when he passed away from heart problems.
Kicking off the list at number 10, demonic boy photo. That's a hot start. Doesn't matter where or when, but odds are you've probably seen this photo at some point in time. It's pretty haunting. You're not really gonna forget about it. Check it out. This photo was taken inside the Amityville house in 1976. It's a young boy with glowing white eyes. It was taken with automatic cameras equipped with infrared. A photographer named Gene Campbell took it, and Gene was working with paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren at this time. Yeah, the famous duo, now rocking the big screen Conjuring universe. They were on this case in real life, which is a fun little fact that not many know. This photo was revealed 3 years after it was taken on the Merv Griffin show, and many believe this is the ghost of John DeFeo, one of the boys who lived there prior during the 1974 attack. We're still trying to cover this today. What do you guys think? Elaborate hoax, or perhaps this photo is the only solid piece of evidence that the Amityville house is indeed haunted? Number 9. New owners. So less than a year after the DeFeo attack, the house was listed at $80,000, which is absolutely insane. The property was massive and beautiful for that matter, despite the horrible history. Back in 1927, a young couple named John and Catherine Moynihan, they built this home, and their families lived there until 1965, and then they sold it to the DeFeos. Now, nothing paranormal had taken place before this. Nobody went insane overnight. It was just a home. To see the price of $80,000 for this house, the Lutz family just couldn't say no. They of course got their new home cleansed as soon as they moved in. They had a priest come in and do his whole thing, but evidently it still wasn't enough. As soon as they moved in, the Lutz family started to hear banging on the walls. Doors would start slamming all by themselves, and George started to hear voices, but I'll get into that a little bit later on. They even got more than they bargained for when they moved in price-wise, because they discovered a secret room. Number 8. The Red Room. No, not that red room, sickos. When the couple first moved in, they had building plans, right? They wanted to see every measurement, every angle, every room, every nook and cranny. That's the whole point of moving into a home. You kind of need to know, what it is. Especially after something that horrible happens. You're like, okay, can we look at the basement, please? They discovered a small red room when they got there, not listed on these plans. It was a 4-foot by 5-foot room hiding behind a shelf in the basement. It was painted blood red. It wasn't actual blood, but still, it's creepy. Harry refused to go near it. See, Harry was the family lab, and we all know dogs don't lie. Especially when they do that half bark thing too. That's always creepy. When they're like, buh, buh. Like commit, bark or don't bark. Number 7, green ooze. In the old Amityville movie, based on the book, there's a scene where the walls are bleeding. Check it out. Now, while this adds a horror element to the film, it's also even more messed up in real life. Well, maybe not more, but it's definitely still odd. Green ooze would apparently leak through these walls, and green ooze would drip through the keyhole of the playroom door. That was the final touch that made the Lutz family decide to run for their lives. Without bringing anything with them, might I add. Yeah, if my house was trying to Nickelodeon slime me at 3 a.m., I'd probably move out as well. When asked about the haunted ooze, both Kathy and George passed a lie detector test. They passed. We got ooze in the walls, Harry Potter's red room in the corner. What else? Number 6, demonic pig. Okay, that's what else. I have to mention this one. It's the weirdest details of all that I could find with this house and all the events that happened. The demonic pig incident, of course. We're not sure if this really happened or not, but either way, it's kind of funny, kind of creepy. The same lawyer who represented Ronald DeFeo had met with the Lutz family. They were looking to dive further into the demonic aspect of this whole case, so who better to talk to than the guy from the original family attack back in 1974, I guess. The lawyer came out and said that there was a cat that would often visit the Lutz family, and it would bug the family through the window sometimes. The lawyer, Weber, told us the cat thing, but the Lutz family claims that it was actually a demonic green-eyed pig that would terrorize them through these windows. Weber insists that this was all made up, but Daniel Lutz, who was 9 at the time of all of this, he said in a 2013 documentary that the demonic pig visits were very real. What do you guys think, demon pig or demon cat? Either way, both pretty silly. Number 5, moving sale. So when the Lutz family left the house and vowed to never return again right after what happened with the DeFeo family, that's one thing that's haunting in itself, but eventually the belongings have to be figured out. They have to be tossed or sold. And back in August 2010, they were sold. There was this massive yard sale, a moving sale rather, where they just got rid of everything. And by this time, there had now been 2 movies on the Amityville Horrors, so fans showed up. People showed up with like Ryan Reynolds t-shirts. There were hundreds lined up around the block for the chance to buy something from the Amityville house. There was even a sign that said no children, no cell phones, no cameras. Yeah, like it's a Lady Gaga concert. You have to like tuck your phone away. But the disturbing part here is that actual neighbors showed up. It was hard on them because they actually knew the DeFeo family. This was emotional for them. They haven't seen anything in the house for years, but now they have to wait behind 100 haunted house spooky fans. How disturbing is that? A violent attack on a family, and then some dude from Phoenix is like, I got the TV remote. Still works. Yes. Number 4, address change. Okay, back in 2017, the house sold again, this time for $605,000, a bit more bang for your buck. The famous 112 Ocean Avenue is now 108 Ocean Avenue, and they changed the number to hopefully deter tourists. Could you imagine ghost hunting teams just showing up out of the blue while you're in the middle of brunch? I get it, change the address, change the name, everything. The house has actually been owned by 4 different families since the attack back in the 70s, and the house honestly has never looked better than today. None of those other families reported any paranormal activity, and when you consider the fact that the Lutz family was in a financial struggle, it doesn't seem too crazy to make up a paranormal story and then try and sell it to the world. Evidently, if that's the case, it worked. We're doing it. I'm doing it right now. It's my job to do this right now. Perhaps one of the darkest details recovered was from the Lutz family lawyer. Number 3, many bottles of wine. When you hear about the demonic pig head or green ooze coming from the walls, you gotta think at one point, okay, this is obviously made up. This has to be a lie. I myself have never seen ooze coming from a keyhole, and the Lutz former lawyer, William Weber, straight up came out and said that these hauntings were discussed and planned out and never happened. They were discussed over many bottles of wine. Yeah, that ought to do it. The same lawyer as Ronald DeFeo had to deal with this. What a life. In 1979, Weber told People magazine that he helped create these stories, he was involved, and that they all took real life incidents but gave them a haunting twist, like the cat and then the pig head, for instance. That's what many bottles of wine will do to you. Maybe the walls weren't covered in ooze or blood or anything, maybe they were just covered in wine because they were all drunk, banging into the halls trying to plan out how they can be rich. Or maybe the entire thing was real. This next one should spark a conversation. Number 2, Daniel Lutz. Daniel was just 9 years old when these hauntings took place. He was 9 when he and his family had to run away in the middle of the night. He's not gonna forget that. That's gonna be some trauma up here. He's recently told his side of the story in a documentary called My Amityville Horror. Now the film's director, Eric Walter, says he believes something happened to these people, but we just don't know exactly what it was yet. He was contacted by a friend of Daniel's, and then come 2009, Walter and Daniel met. Daniel was now in his 40s, and he's not in the best shape when it comes to talking about the house still. He says he's been running away from this thing his entire life, and now finally it caught up. Also, Daniel's friend just totally outed him. I don't know who that is, but come on, man. He's like running away from a haunted house and he's like, that's the guy, that's Daniel, get him. Daniel lives a quiet life now, but to this day he stands by the fact that that house was haunted and he has nightmares of everything that happened still today. Number 1, occult ties. Okay, so we've heard some things that sound very real. The DeFeo lawyer, his side, the son of the Lutz family who was trying to avoid being discovered all this time. It's fishy, it's all a little fishy. But one of the biggest clues as to what really happened in that house lies in George's bookshelf. The stepfather, George Lutz, had a history with dabbling in the occult. And on top of that, he would often wake up every night at 3:15 a.m., the same time that those horrible events took place with the family prior. So many believe that George's interest in the paranormal is actually what led him to be possessed by these dark spirits. The same spirits that perhaps had something to do with the brutal history to the family beforehand, the DeFeos. Kicking off the list at number 10, the Old Arnold Estate. If you're a horror fan like myself, then part of you probably wants to visit this conjuring house. I don't know, like 10% of me wants to peek in. Or Ed and Lorraine's Museum of Horrors. I think I'd rather go there. The house in the film looked a lot fancier than it did in real life. It was more cinematic and they made it look even more creepy as a property in general, but that's what happens when you have millions of dollars in your budget. You're trying to make a more memorable horror film too. Now this is the real house. It's referred to by the parent family as the Old Arnold Estate, and it's located in Harrisville, Rhode Island. On the real property, there's a barn to the left of the house, so I have to say, the original kinda seems way scarier than the movie. I don't know, barns creep me out. A lot of spiders. Aside from paranormal horrors, the parent family also had to deal with financial ones. When the family did live there, a pipe burst and flooded their business, so they had to sell more than 85% of their new land. Number 9, witch history. The Conjuring film, the main plot here of course is a witch named Bathsheba Sherman, and it's haunting the grounds, or the house. It's a wickedly evil spirit, and the real Bathsheba was born in 1812. She married a Rhode Islander named Judson Sherman, and they had 4 children. Also, apologies if I'm saying her name wrong, but I'm kind of okay with that. I don't want this to be like a Beetlejuice situation where she just pops up randomly and just pukes in my mouth. Herbert Sherman, her firstborn, arrived when she was 37 years old. He lived a long life as a farmer and he grew old and all that jazz, but the other 3 children that were born afterwards, there's barely any information about them at all. Julia, Edward, or George. The mother, the witch, passed away on May 25th, 1885, 4 years after her husband did. Now there are stories that her body turned to stone when she died, or it was some sort of paranormal form of paralysis, because of course over time these stories change. It's like the longest game of broken telephone. Obviously a few things here are fake, but what the Perron family did find was the beginning of something very real. Number 8, Bathsheba's gravestone. The grave of the witch was found alarmingly close to the Perron family's new home, right on the property next door. Her resting place now is in the cemetery right across the street from the fire station near downtown Harrisville. So if you're ever visiting Rhode Island and you want to maybe, I don't know, be possessed by a witch, throw that in the GPS. Enjoy, and also, good game. They didn't initially think the strange happenings were because of a witch gravesite, obviously, that's not where their mind went to first, but that's when Ed and Lorraine were asked to help out, and they knew right away that it was, well, the witch next door. Number 7, the hauntings begin. The initial incident happened a few years before the paranormal investigators were actually called in. Carolyn, the mother, she was laying on the sofa and then all of a sudden her leg muscle started to have a spasm. Her calf was in this immense pain. She had no idea what was happening. It was out of nowhere. Then when she looked down at the ground, she saw this puddle of blood. She got stabbed by something. It was a very small puncture. And no, if you're thinking it was a bee, it wasn't. She looked and looked for a sign, anything to hint what just happened, and she couldn't find anything. Also, it was a perfect circle. Carolyn described it as if it was a large sewing needle that went through her skin. Ouch. And in true witchy fashion, the Perron family also had broom problems. That's right, the broom would go missing or it would move place to place. And even more strange, Carolyn would sometimes find piles of dirt in the middle of a recently cleaned kitchen. You gotta love a helping, cold, dead hand. Number 6, levitating chair. In the movie, the exorcism happens at the end, of course. It's like a happy-ish ending, but in real life, that exorcism never took place. Lorraine Warren has since said that her husband, Ed, would have never performed such a thing, nor would he try. But Andrea Perron, one of the 5 children, has come forward many, many years later, and she said that she witnessed a seance with her mother, where her mother was speaking in a different language, and she also did not sound anything like her mom. Not even close, which is terrifying. And as Andrea recalls, her mother's chair then started to levitate like it did in the movie, and then after a beat, she was launched out of the chair across the room. It wasn't just Carolyn that experienced these horrible games either. As we saw in the film adaptation, the children too were busy with their own spirits. Number 5, the music box. We had to include one of the creepiest elements of the Conjuring movie, the Perron family music box. Director James Wan wanted to use this music box in the first film because, well, mirrors and creepy tones make for great suspense, but also this was a real haunted artifact from the real house. Today the box is safely stored in the Warrens Museum alongside other items that look more or less normal upon first glance, but they're actually extremely haunted. I'll get to those in a bit. This part in the movie actually scared the out of me. Any mirror scene, I can't do it. I always like eat my hoodie. They always do it so slow too. They're like I would slam it, just slam it, have toothbrushes fly out. I don't care, I'm scared. But this was real life, you can't forget that. This music box actually caused so much trouble for these poor girls. Specifically April, the youngest of the Perron children. She found this antique in the house and she used it to communicate to another spirit, the spirit named Rory. Number 4, other owners. Andrea Perron has told us that every single person who has once lived in this house, they all experienced some sort of paranormal activity. That's comforting. Some left this house screaming and running with only a few belongings. That would be me day 1. I wouldn't even make it till night. I'd be out of there by 4:30 p.m. Sharp. When the parents sold the house after all these haunting encounters, the guy who moved in then temporarily to start fixing up the house, he left too. He left without his car, he left without all of his tools, and yes, he even left without his clothing. Ghosts don't wait for you to put on pants. That's what I learned doing this. Ghosts do not wait. The current owners of the 18th century farmhouse, Corey and Jennifer Heisen, bought the home in June 2019. And yes, they've already seen stuff. You may ask, who in their right mind would move into a known haunted house? Well, paranormal investigators. That's exactly who. The scariest couple ever. They're like, oh, this is perfect. Over $1 million. They're like, debit, we'll take it. Let's get new wallpaper. So far, they've actually witnessed doors opening and closing on their own, and also loud knocks on the wall. Corey, the husband, admits to having a hard time on nights when he's all alone. He says he doesn't feel anything evil per se, but the house does feel busy. Number 3, the Warren Occult Museum. I mentioned the music box earlier, which sits now in the Warrens' creepy personal occult museum. Once belonging to the Perron family, the music box is one of many strange artifacts. In the museum, there is a vampire coffin, Yep, you heard me. A satanic idol, the conjuring mirror. There's a shadow doll that apparently has the ability to visit your dreams and in Freddy Krueger-like fashion, stop your heart while you're asleep. And also Annabelle is in there as well, but she's got friends. Annabelle has friends. You'll be pleased to know that Annabelle is actually the least creepy of all of them. A haunted pearl necklace puts Martha Wayne to shame, right next to the haunted glass eyeballs, of course. I'd love to know more about the glass eyeballs. Let's see that movie. But one of the most fascinating items in here has to be the headless T-Rex toy. Is that from Toy Story? Is this Sid's room from Toy Story? What a crossover that would be. Number 2, other incidents. A total of 8 generations of one extended family lived and passed away in that same house, all before the arrival of the parent family. Andrea has been quite vocal about the happenings, and to be fair, if I had a fraction of her childhood, I wouldn't shut the up. That sounds like an insane time. I would never sleep. She also confidently states that a lot of those souls never left the house. The Black Book of Burryville, which already sounds creepy, was the town's public records book at the time, and on the property there, it stated that there were 2 hangings that took place. Poison was used in a death type scenario. There were 2 drownings, not 1 but 2, and then 4 men who were passing by just happened to freeze to death on the property. Andrea has a book, it's called House of Darkness, House of Light. So if you're curious to read up on more of these happenings, go right to the source herself and support. Finally, number 1, a photograph of Bathsheba Sherman. You always see those UFO videos and they're filmed with like a BlackBerry curve. It's absolute trash, it's like 420p, it's horrible, not convincing at all. Not even, no zoom, no effort, just Cloverfields. There's never clear evidence of anything nowadays, but we may just have a clear photo with the real witch, Bathsheba Sherman. This photo is from the parent family farmhouse back when it was still the Arnold estate. This was 1885, so the witch was most likely in her 70s at the time, but still it's hard to tell, the photo is still grainy. But that's because it was 1885, right? You know, it's not a BlackBerry. This is like the world's oldest, creepiest game of Guess Who. This witch lived next door to the farm, and although we'll never really know who is who, many believe she's the lady in the middle, closest to the camera, like right over here. Also, the fact that she's wearing some sort of mask makes this grainy photo even more haunting. She's standing by herself. I feel like the vibe of that group shot was off. Like nobody wanted to stand next to the literal witch. I don't blame them. Guys, do you think the real Bathsheba Sherman is in this photo? The lady on the left looks a little bit witchy. I don't know, who am I to judge?